Climate change is rearranging life in the oceans. Species are on the move to track suitable climate, ecosystems are changing as species leave and enter, and vulnerable systems like coral reefs are increasingly threatened. MPA managers want to know about these changes and how to manage the threats they pose to their systems. Vulnerability assessments for climate change can help answer those questions. All MPAs will have species and ecosystem objectives, so let's begin with looking at how to do a climate change vulnerability assessment for biological systems. We do this by looking at climate change in two ways. First, its impact on existing priorities, and second, on how it may introduce new priorities or challenges. To understand climate change impacts on existing priorities, start with species and ecosystems important to your MPA. Then identify key needs for those species or ecosystems. For instance, for a coral reef fish, the presence of a coral reef and sites for breeding aggregation may be important. Then assess the impact climate change may have on each of these needs. For the reef fish, corals may bleach due to warming water temperatures, and spawning aggregation sites may be altered by warming waters or shifting currents. Add up these climate change impacts to determine which species are most vulnerable and how that vulnerability might be reduced by management actions. For instance, a shrinking spawning window might be compensated for by reducing or eliminating fishing in that window. The second part of the approach is anticipating new priorities and challenges. Due to climate change, new species may arrive and require conservation. Whole ecosystems, like coral reefs now establishing in Japan, may appear for the first time. Existing priorities may be challenged by these new arrivals. Models and expert opinion can help identify these novel management issues. Scientists familiar with the ecology of the MPA might be able to suggest the kind of changes that may occur. AquaX is a mapping tool that simulates species movements in response to future climate change that can be used to estimate possible species arrivals and departures to and from an MPA. Another important part of assessing climate change vulnerability of an MPA is looking at climate change impacts on communities and human use of the MPA. Communities living within the MPA are especially important, but even MPAs with no communities within their boundaries need to consider how climate change may impact human uses, such as fishing or tourism. To assess community vulnerability, talking to communities and mapping resource use is a key first step. Then communities and scientists can work together to ask what community needs may be impacted by climate change. Examples might be water availability affected by changes in rainfall, agricultural land flooded by sea level rise, or changes in fish availability. Once climate change vulnerabilities of communities have been identified, MPA managers can work with communities to find solutions that improve community outcomes while minimizing damage to reserve objectives. For example, reductions in preferred fish may be offset with livestock grazing or other forms of protein, or flooding septic systems could be relocated upslope to improve community health outcomes and reduce nutrient runoff into marine environments. Other human uses and management responses can be defined in similar ways. For instance, tourism can be directed away from recently bleached reefs, or fishing of algae-eating fish can be reduced to help bleached reefs recover. Vulnerability assessments are multifaceted tools that allow MPA managers to evaluate climate change impacts on both biological systems and human communities. For more resources on vulnerability assessments, please visit the link below.